Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of the Nick Cage Fight Podcast, where we've got to pick up every stitch because it must be the season of the witch. I'm one of your hosts, Josh, joined as always by Rich and Ryan, here to talk about Season of the Witch. How are we feeling, guys?
Better than I have the last couple of movies.
I'm screaming Deus Volt.
Yeah, I actually enjoyed this one. This one being Season of the Witch, 2011 film that was rated PG-13, but with a nice tight runtime of an hour and 35 minutes. I really liked that aspect of it. Also, it really wasn't going to be able to do too much with any more time on the clock, I think.
Yeah, no, but I think it did a lot with the 135 minutes, to be fair.
It did.
I was expecting it to be longer, actually, but I was pleasantly surprised when it wrapped. Like it felt like a pretty concise package.
Yeah, it was pretty solid. So I think we can jump right into housekeeping, and we will start off with the director, which is Dominic Sena, who did Nick Cage's Gone in 60 Seconds, Swordfish, and California with a K on the front. Haven't seen that one.
Pretty good. It's got David Duchovny. You gotta love David Duchovny.
Oh yeah.
So he was in California and Californication?
Correct. Yes.
I think you have to have him and a Red Hot Chili Pepper song in any piece of media about California. I think that's actually the law. I'm not 100% on that though. So, yeah, no major red flags from the director. I was like, all right, this could be decent. On to the writer is Braggy F. Shutt, which sounds like I'm saying a phrase more than that I'm saying a name, but I hope I pronounced it correctly. And this individual wrote, their credits are a little bit odd. So they did a couple of shorts, like short films. They wrote for the Ninjago TV series. And then they wrote Escape Room and Samaritan, which I haven't seen yet, but is on my list of things to watch. So yeah.
Is Samaritan the one with Stallone?
Yep.
Okay, I did see that. It's not good, but you might have a good time.
I liked the premise. It was like he's like a retired superhero. It's like right?
Yeah, basically.
Didn't see it, so
it was merely okay.
Well, that's a shame, but I will still probably check it out. Moving on to the cast,
that's what we do now. We just watch movies.
Yeah, we start as always with Nick Cage, starring as Beeman. I can't remember how they pronounce it.
It's Bayman.
Like the names in this kind of.
I'm not gonna lie. When I was writing down all of the characters' names, I'm like, "There's no fucking way I'm gonna be referring to them as their actors the entire time." But I forced myself to use the character name in the notes as much as possible.
All right, fair.
I still will probably screw this up. Ron Pearlman is in this film playing Felson. Ron Pearlman, recognizable from such films as Hellboy, the first two Hellboys, Pacific Rim, Drive, Blade 2. He's the narrator of like all of the Fallout games, if I'm not mistaken.
Sure is.
And the bad guy from Afro Samurai, the first Afro Samurai miniseries. So
and I'll shout out two movies that I think more people need to see with him in it. Kronos, Guillermo del Toro's vampire film, and City of Lost Children by the same director as Delicatessen, which has some extremely cool production value.
Nice. Very cool. Next up, we have Claire Foy as the girl. Claire Foy has been in a bunch of stuff that I haven't personally seen, but she was in Vampire Academy, First Man, Women Talking. Sorry, I went right into like women shopping with the
women be talking.
Women Talking, and The Crown, which I've heard of. I've heard people talk about, but I personally have no interest.
She's also in an adaptation of a Terry Pratchett novel, Going Postal. That's pretty good. The BBC made for TV novel adaptation, like miniseries kind of deal.
Huh. Next up, we have Stephen Campbell Moore as Devilzak. This guy's name I do not use in my notes. I call him the priest because there's no fucking way I'm writing Devilzak 50 times. He was in The Bank Job, A Good Woman, The History of Boys, and a lot of TV series.
A lot of theater too.
Yeah.
And a lot of video game voiceovers.
Oh, really? Any good ones?
Final Fantasy 14, Dragon Age Inquisition,
Oh yeah.
the Pirate Assassin's Creed.
That was a fun one as far as
That is
Assassin's
a
Creeds
fun one,
go.
yeah.
Next up, we have Stephen Graham as Hagamar. Stephen Graham, if you don't know the name, you definitely would recognize the face. He plays Al Capone in Boardwalk Empire. He was in The Irishman. He was in Snatch. He was in one of the post Johnny Depp Pirates of the Caribbeans, but probably in a lot of makeups and prosthetics. I didn't watch those films, so I don't know.
The
But
big
definitely,
one for me is This Is England, which he's in. He plays the racist skinhead that gets out of jail and causes problems for the anti-racist skinheads.
oh, interesting.
Yeah. That's a good movie that starts out as kind of fun and wacky and then gets really dark.
I could imagine. I might have to check that one out. Next up, we have Ulrich Thompson as Eckhart. Ulrich was also in the 2011 The Thing. He was also in Kingdom of Heaven, The International, The Celebration, and Brothers. Next up, we have Robert Sheehan as Kay. Now, he is this actor is most definitely most recognizable from the Umbrella Academy. He plays Klaus, but he was also in Mute, which was I think a Netflix film that I actually really liked. It had one of the Skarsgårds in it and Paul Rudd, semi-futuristic. I enjoyed it. I don't know what the popular opinion is on that, but he was also in he was also in two films that I put in here because both of them have mortal in the title. It was the Mortal Instruments, City of Bones, and Mortal Engines. And I'm not sure. I think they're like adaptations of young adult novels, but I'm not entirely sure. And I'm not sure if they're related to each other or just coincidentally named.
He was also in
No clue.
Moonwalkers alongside Ron Perlman.
Oh, there you go.
So another connection.
And then last but not least, certainly not least, Christopher Lee is in this film as Cardinal d'Amboise.
Yeah, he was the quest giver, basically.
Yeah, exactly.
A really gross quest giver.
Yeah, he had the exclamation point over his head. You accept the quest.
Oh, that's what was coming out of there.
Yeah, no, that was just a
yes.
growth, I think. I don't think that was
No. That was the exclamation point because if you look after they talked to him, it turned into a great question mark.
So Christopher Lee, he played Count Dooku in the Star Wars prequels. He was Saruman in the Lord of the Rings movies. He was in the original Wicker Man film. He voiced Ansem in the Kingdom Hearts series, and he was also in Sleepy Hollow, I believe. So there you go, Christopher Lee.
And since I already shouted out a Terry Pratchett adaptation, he was also the voice of Death in all of the cartoon Discworld movies.
Oh, there you go.
He was also in this crazy werewolf movie that I am forgetting the name of now that I'm going to look up because it was fucking bonkers.
Doesn't he also have a metal album?
He does have a metal album. He had a metal band that he fronted, and it rules.
That's really fucking cool.
It's called Howling 2, Your Sister is a Werewolf.
Oh, those Howling movies are weird and horny.
This was I've never seen Howling 1. I only watched Howling 2.
If I remember correctly, the first one's about like a porn studio that's got werewolf problems.
Well, the reason why I watched it is because back before, we knew any better, JonTron did a video on it. And I used to like JonTron until he went crazy and racist. And well, I guess he's always been crazy and racist. He was just better at hiding it.
That's fair. Did we also mention that he was Dracula in most of the Hammer horror Dracula joints?
No, I was surprised, but
okay,
I just kind of thought that goes without saying.
I mean, honestly, I could just keep rattling off fucking Christopher Lee credits all day because that man rules.
No, my favorite anecdote about him was when Peter Jackson was trying to give him direction on the stabbing scene in the Lord of the Rings films. Christopher Lee told him, "That's not the sound a man makes when you stab him in the back." And Peter Jackson is like, "That's scary as shit. Do what you want to do then in this scene." So yeah. So unless anybody has anything to yell at me about, I think that is going to wrap us up for housekeeping.
Yeah. All right. I got one more for Christopher Lee. He was Gregory Rasputin in Rasputin the Mad Monk, which is a great movie that more people need to see.
I will see that. Yeah, no. Outside of that, this cast is it's kind of thin. I don't want to say thin, but it's like unknowns, I guess.
It's the actors on screen are kept relatively tight, with the exception of like the very beginning of the film. It's very straightforward. Hero's journey, these people, they don't stick around for too long. Big climax at the end, right?
I mean, it's mostly a road movie. They don't have a lot of interaction with people outside of their circle.
No, they don't.
Yeah, so
So
it's a buddy cop road trip movie.
well, that's one of the big my big stance on this movie is that it's a buddy cop movie, but instead of cops, they're knights in the crusades. And I now want to see Cage and Pearlman in an actual buddy cop movie. I would watch the fuck out of that film.
But
Yeah,
like
that would roll.
I would want it to be in like set in like the 70s. Like basically give me
Dude, just give us a Starsky and Hutch with them.
give me a
Yeah.
The Good Guys, but with them.
Miami Vice, maybe.
I do
That
love
would
me
be
some Miami Vice.
crazy.
All right, so we can jump into the plot now. So the opening scene, we see an obscenely jewel encrusted book cover that someone is transcribing from, and then we cut immediately away from said book to a woman in chains being dragged by some knights in the city of Village in 1235 AD. We actually see there are several women. They're being told they're basically taking this little stone bridge, and they're told by this guy in priest robes that they've been found guilty of witchcraft and are sentenced to death. Two of the women try to get out of the death sentence by being like, "No, I didn't do it." No, I'm sorry. One confesses in the hopes that if she confesses, they won't carry out the sentence. The other one denies it, says she just, made some homemade Vicks vapor rub. That's not witchcraft, which is clearly a lie. And then the third one, which is an older lady with like a milky eye, classic witch characteristic, is like, "You're gonna burn in hell," to the priest. So we actually do get a cameo here of somebody that I left off of housekeeping on purpose. Rory McCann is in this scene. Rory McCann, of course, played the Hound in the home box office series Game of Thrones. And
I didn't realize that was him.
So then he was also in The Wire.
And he was also in Hot Fuzz.
I was gonna say he's Yarp.
Yep.
Michael. Shit, I can't remember his name.
Hang on,
Michael Armstrong.
Wait, I think that I might be confusing characters. Then hang on. You can keep going, but I need to now look this up.
No worries. But yeah, so very, very brief appearance from Rory McCann, which I enjoyed greatly. The women are all basically unceremoniously tossed off the bridge with nooses around their necks. The priest tries to stop Rory McCann as he's walking away, and says that they need to pull up the bodies so they can say some magic Jesus words to ensure that they don't rise again as super witches of some sort. But Rory responds that we hung them and drowned them, or hanged them and drowned them. That's dead enough for me. So he just sort of trots off.
Debatably, it wasn't Jesus' words. They were reading from the Key of Solomon, which was a pre-Christian text.
I don't disagree, but considering the fact that it's set in like the Crusades and they're all like Franciscan dressed, I'm gonna call them magic Jesus words.
That's fair.
Also, I'm thinking of the wrong person.
It was in Latin. That's Jesus language.
I'm thinking of the wrong person, by the way. I'm thinking of the guy who played Peter, the one who like did the Red Wedding or fucking whatever.
Oh, yeah.
That
the dude that runs the brothel.
Yes, he's the one who was also in The Wire, so my apologies.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
I have not seen Game of Thrones, so it's like all these things run together for me.
Gotcha. You've never watched Game of Thrones?
No, okay. So this is my story. I watched the first 4 episodes, really enjoyed it. Joffrey just trolled the shit out of me, and I just wanted to flip the table and like stop playing this game. So that's what I did.
So they wrote the character so detestable that it made you stop watching the show. That's good writing.
I was like, this is good writing because I hate this person. I hate this 9-year-old so much. It's like playing a game of Magic the Gathering where like the kid's dad is right behind him being like, no, don't play that card, play that card.
Okay, so I was wrong. Key of Solomon's actually a 17th century Italian text that was written by like a huckster.
Oh, so it's Nootropics, but for Jesus.
I guess, yeah. I know Lesser Key of Solomon's the big one. That's where you have like basically just the laundry list of demons and what they look like and how fucked up they are in the hierarchies of hell.
Oh yeah, and
Oh,
like the summoning stuff, like that's the shit that Ari Aster pulled from for Hereditary, right?
Right, exactly. Also
Yeah.
known as the Ars Goetia. That's like specifically where you would find like the information on Paimon in Hereditary.
I have that book. It's in my closet right now, actually.
Neat.
oh,
Remind me after the show. I'll show you guys. So so the priest sets about hauling up these bodies himself because it's very important. If he doesn't do his spell, these women are going to rise as and cast their spells, which are bad spells because they're not Jesus spells. I think that's at least my understanding of it. So he starts hauling them up and reading some Latin at their bodies. And I will say one of them actually looks like she's working on some weird like witchy resurrection thing because she's kicking and squirming a little bit more than you'd expect a dead body to. But he finishes the incantation in time, and that stops. And then when he goes to pull up the third body, he gets yanked over the bridge like a slapstick fishing sequence.
This kind of gave me hope that the movie would be more of like an Army of Darkness alike, but it doesn't really go in that direction.
It does a little bit, just not
not
competently.
immediately.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't think it has the humor that like a
No,
Sam Raimi production would have.
correct. Actually, Raimi probably would have directed the shit out of this film.
Oh man, dude, that final showdown would have been so sick if this was a Raimi joint.
So he gets hauled over into the water, and then he like scrambles up on the banks of this river, and like a weird witchy hand almost drags him back in the water. He runs back to the book, but this damp lady flies out of the water and casts a fireball on his book and then hangs him from the bridge. At this point, my opinion was, all right, this is all right so far. A bad CGI, but you learn to put up with bad CGI if you watch enough low budget movies where they want to do stuff like monsters. They just got to do bad CGI. That's the consequences of the amount of budget that they're working with typically.
Yeah, and I mean they like their budget was only 40 million, and it's like how much of that is going to Nick Cage and Ron Perlman?
Yeah, exactly. And I sometimes find that bad CG can be just as effective as good CG as long as the tone matches. Like Kung Fu Hustle and Shaolin Soccer both have some awful CG, but it completely works because they're like live action cartoons.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's a little
absolutely.
bit hard to do bad CG with anything with a serious tone because it kind of just
Right, exactly.
So at this point, we cut to this. Cracked me up. I'm gonna be saying a lot of locations and years because this
Okay,
is essentially
I've got the corrected years if you want them as you put them out because all of these are wrong.
good. As I say them, you correct the historical record for me. So we cut first to the Gulf of Edremit in the Age of the Crusades. It doesn't give us a specific year, just Age of the Crusades.
Which is like a 400 or 500 year period, depending on which historian you talk to.
And in this scene, we see a bunch of Christians marching through a desert, and they are confronted by an opposing army.
I
We
feel
see
bad for that kid in the front who just has to like carry what looks like a solid gold cross. It's got to be at least 100 pounds, and he's just like just carrying it. First kid to get shot too, 100%.
and we get to see Cage and Pearlman in their armor. They look good. The armor looks fine. Pearlman immediately is fantastic. Essentially, Bemin and Felson are quipping back and forth to each other that the one who kills fewer enemies has to buy the drinks, and so then they throw on their helmets. Their helmets are a little bit goofy. Pearlman's helmet specifically, I found to be a little bit goofy, but it was awesome.
I
And
actually
so,
really like the line here that I think Perlman says, where he's like, "You take the 300 on the left, I'll take the 300 on the right."
yeah,
And Cage says, "Well, then who will like? Then it's a tie. Who's gonna buy the drinks?" And Perlman just looks at him and says, "Oh, you'll be buying the drinks."
Yeah.
so the armies charge, and we get some slow motion sword fight scenes, and then we get a cut of to a scene of the guys that are in like a tavern and hanging out with what looks like to be women of ill repute. which seems odd to me for Crusader Knights, but
Oh, that's not odd. That is par for the course for the Crusades.
okay, so it's just standard level hypocrisy, right?
Exactly.
Got
Yeah.
it.
They were definitely whoremongers, drunks, and pretty generally bad dudes.
Well, yeah, because they do get into it a little bit in this
Yes.
movie, but like they bribed people to go into the Crusades by saying like, if you fight, we will make sure that God forgives your sins, and that's why they get like kind of the worst of the worst people.
Yeah,
Yep.
what's the all right, my let's see how good our
Indulgences.
thank you. You get all the points. I didn't even get to finish the question. Solid buzz before you get the whole question or answer in jeopardy. So after the tavern scene, we cut to the siege of Tripoli in 1334 AD.
Actually happened 1102 to 1109.
And there's another fight with the boys, and then we cut to the Battle of Imbros in 1337 AD.
1105 this time.
more more hacking and slashing. This fight is at night. Then we cut to the Battle of Arta, 1339 AD.
Oh shit, I didn't look that one up.
Damn it, Ryan.
I'm sure it's wrong. There's only one of these that's actually right.
This fight is in the snow. Then we cut immediately to the Battle of Smyrna in 1344 AD.
That's the correct one.
And this one is
but also it's not actually a battle that was related to the Crusades for this one.
that's was it a siege at least?
It was a siege, yes.
Okay. So this fight is the siege of a city, and Bayman sticks a lady in the chest with his sword in the heat of the fight. He pauses at this and looks around at the carnage. Felson does as well, and it looks like they're both getting a bit tired of all of the murder and Jesus hype man shit. Because by the way, in every fight, there's a dude whose whole job is just to hype these dudes up to kill people for Jesus. So Bayman goes to confront the Jesus hype man about all the women and child murdering that they've been doing, which this made me laugh. I don't think it's supposed to be a funny scene, but they both accuse the other one of working for the devil. Because Bayman's like, yeah, no, maybe it's not God that you're hearing. Maybe it's somebody else. And he's like, only somebody who's being controlled by the devil would say something like that. And so then they both agreed to stop the accusations and go their separate ways. So Bayman and Felson leave the crusade at this point. And then we get a fun little bit of Bayman and Felson as like dirty wanderers. They find a house in like the countryside and just walk in, which I thought was very funny. And they find a family, a dead family that looks like they died of some sort of pox, some sort of plague-ish thing. So they burn down the house and take some horses that they found.
As one does.
Yeah. So as they ride, they're discussing their options, what to do from here. And it comes up that they're not going to be able to travel any significant distance with the horses that they currently have because they're farm horses, not like travel horses. Wrong model, wrong make and model of horse. So they go to this like castle town thing, and we get to see some more Christians. These are a different flavor of Christian. These are the hardcore ascetics, the ones that whip themselves. I believe I'm using
flagellants.
I thought say
ascetic. Yeah, an ascetic is someone who doesn't indulge in earthly delights.
As anybody who played Warhammer Fantasy Battles will know, they're called flagellants.
Yep.
All right. Yeah. No. They're really flagellating the hell out of themselves. As Bayman and Felson go through the town, they're informed that there's some type of plague going on, which seems pretty apparent. They buy some horses, but while they're transferring their saddlebags and things like that, Bayman's crusade blade, falls out of its he has it wrapped in like a blanket, and the stable boy and the guy running the stable sees this, and before they leave, they're confronted by some armored Christians, and they go to fight them. There's a great bit in this where Bayman blocks several crossbow shots with the blade of his sword, which is patently absurd
but badass.
It's very badass. It's very badass, but I don't recommend you betting your life on your ability to stop a crossbow bolt with a
No.
big broadsword. That's not how that works. You're gonna get shot in the chest and die. So for all of our listeners who are living in medieval times, don't trust what you see on TV. So they end up surrendering, and as they're like put in chains, and it looks like they're being arrested and put in jail as deserters, but a priest sees the pommel of the sword as they're being escorted, and sort of takes over and takes Felson and Bayman to a room where there is an old dude with like Elephant Man face going on, laying in a bed. This is Christopher Lee. He's got the plague real bad, just filled to the brim with the plague,
Riddled with it.
yeah, yeah,
I
absolutely.
I do want to point out a bit of anachronism in this scene. They got the bird masks for the plague. Those shits didn't come into vogue until the 1600s.
I did notice that, and that was my first one. I'm like, didn't those things like not exist until like the 17th century?
Yeah, like right around the Renaissance period is when they started using those in conjunction with like filling them with herbs and camphor and vinegar sponges to stop the plague from getting through.
Yeah, what was all right, so what was medicine like in the 1300s, besides obviously, burning witches to stop a pandemic? Were they still balancing humors? Were they
Yes,
bleeding them with leeches and
I
stuff?
think it was a lot of bleeding and humors balancing at that point. But I
Yeah.
could be mistaken. I'm not really up on my like medical history, but I do know that they did not have germ theory for quite some time.
Yeah,
Oh
and
yeah, of
probably
course.
just chopping shit off too. I'm assuming like, this finger's no good anymore. Just take that off.
Yeah, well, no matter how you slice it, the Cardinals' bile levels are off the charts, and he does not have enough yellow humor. I think. I think I'm using the right terms there. So anyway, they're told that the land has been blighted with this plague because of a black witch, and they're told they need to get the witch to an abbey where she can be properly Jesused, and that will stop the plague. Bayman says he's done with the church, and no, fuck you very much. And so they throw Felson and Bayman in a jail cell, and in a cell adjacent to them is a young woman who supposedly is the witch. So Bayman and Felson have some back and forth in the cell, which is a lot of fun. And this is also the point in my notes where I realized this was a buddy cop film, because they're in the dungeon and doing some quips, and Pearlman's like, as far as dungeons go, this isn't that bad, but what is that smell? And Bayman's like, that's you. That's you're smelling yourself. It's
Pretty
pretty.
solid banter.
It's funny. It's funny, and Pearlman is infinitely charming. Even if Cage is a little wooden in this performance, in my opinion, Pearlman absolutely carries the banter almost single-handedly. Very funny and entertaining to watch. So that evening, Bayman has a nightmare about killing the lady in the siege before he left the Crusades, and this wakes him up, and he sees the witch lady in the other cell, and he can see her exposed back in her like prisoner's tunic, and she's got some very serious wounds. It's relatively apparent that she's been tortured. So he has not to hit it too hard on the head, but like a come to Jesus moment where he's like, I'm gonna accept the job, with the viewer being led to believe he has some ulterior motives here. Like maybe he doesn't do this, or he does it so that he can try and control the outcome and ensure that an innocent person doesn't get killed. But regardless, he says, he calls the jailers and says he'll take the witch to the abbey. So at this point in time, the crew grows by one. A man that they ran into informed them when they first got to the town about the plague. A guy named Eckhart is going to go with them as well. The priest who originally noticed the pommel is going to go with them as well. And this priest lays out, he pulls out a map and sort of shows them the route that they're supposed to take to the abbey. Now, Felson and Bayman are experienced at travel and going from place to place to do war. Logistics is actually pretty important. So they point out a bunch of flaws with the proposed route and say that what they really need is a guide to get them to the Abbey. And the priest says, "We have somebody who has, traveled this path before. Let me take you to him." And so the gentlemen are taken to a stockade where we get introduced to Hagamar. This is Stephen Graham's character, who is literally just doing the accent he has in Boardwalk Empire. It's kind of funny,
I
but
find it really funny because he's a British dude. Like, just do your British accent.
but his character is immediately entertaining because as soon as they approach, he's in the stocks and he says, "Welcome. Would you like to kick me in the groin or throw rotten fruit at me?" And it's very funny, but basically he agrees to act as their guide in exchange for being released from the stocks, and getting a pardon, specifically for his crimes. So with that, I think we should listen to some ads. Maybe there is an ad for a pardon, or maybe there will be an ad for a stockade. We don't have nearly enough stockades these days. I think we should bring those back.
There's one a
So,
couple of miles from me.
what was that?
There's a stockade a couple of miles from us.
What?
Yeah,
Oh, okay. Bleep that.
yeah, I'm gonna
yeah.
bleep that.
Yeah.
Slowly
Whoops.
triangulating
Whoops.
our location every episode.
Yeah,
One
but
more piece of information.
before you listen to these ads about pardons and stockades for sale, we do have a Patreon.
I was about to say,
And
I was off mic for 5 minutes. Did we talk about the Patreon?
well, no, we waited and rambled and made up ads that might play to delay so that you could do our Patreon pitch as always.
Oh, hell yeah. Patreon.com/Nick Cage Fight. We got
Uh,
stuff on there. We have episodes with no commercials. We have bonus episodes. We're going to start a new podcast too called Ron Perlman Fight, which is not actually reviewing Ron Perlman movies. It's would you rather fight Ron Perlman or this other person?
I thought it was going to be called Diving for Perlmans.
No.
Perlman.
That is going to be the actual movie review. This is would you rather fight Ron Perlman or Abraham Lincoln?
How about Pearlman after swine?
Perlmans before swine. I like that one.
Okay, yeah, that's the phrase I was diving into my memory warehouse for that just did not come out right.
No, that
Yeah.
one is good too. But episodes, with no ads or anything, they just get thrown right up on there. That's our $3 tier. We have bonus episodes at higher tiers. We are going to experiment with a live stream within the next couple of weeks too to see how that goes and see if it's like logistically possible to just do it like we record these just all on Zoom, or if we have to like all be in a room together and contaminate each other's air and get COVID and die.
One can only hope.
One can only hope.
So if you're not listening to this on our Patreon feed, listen to these ads about pardons and stockades.
Man, stockade technology is really going a long way, don't you think, guys?
Yeah, you know what? I think they really knocked it out of the park with the initial design, but I do like ones with all the bells and whistles.
Yeah, like when they added the massager feature, it was
I was gonna say, I'm pretty sure the only stockades you can buy commercially now are for fetish purposes.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's what I meant when I said I like them with all the bells and whistles. I mean, the ones with literal bells and whistles attached to them. It's just it's sounds like a fun time.
yeah.
So now that we have our crew that is going to set out on this quest, we've got Eckhart, the priest dude, Hagamar, Bayman, and Felson. The only thing that we're missing is the witch. So they are told that the witch has supposedly been sedated, and when they go and take her to put her in this sort of like prison carriage, she attacks everybody and attacks them pretty competently until she's finally hit in the back of the head with a sword, the pommel of a sword, and they throw her in the cage carriage. And the boys all set out. Back at the Cardinal's deathbed, it looks like he has finally succumbed to the plague, and we get a scene of one of like the little like the pages or one of the boys that was there. This is the character K, but we get a little close up on him, intimating that something's going to happen with this character. So back to the boys on the road. Eckhart has some questions about why this girl is considered a plague witch. He seems a little bit suspicious of the conclusions, and Felsen and Bayman realize they are being followed. So they set up to, catch the guy who is following them, and it turns out it is Kay. This is the guy who plays Klaus in Umbrella Academy, and he explains that he wants to follow them and help them in return for them vouching for him to obtain a knighthood. They are not super thrilled with the suggestion. But Kay says, "No, I can be useful. I've fought in tournaments and so on and so forth." And they're like, "Well, that's nonsense because we just did a whole multi-year war montage at the beginning. Like we are not the same." The kid manages to insult Felsen, and we get a little bit of sword fight action.
Which is it's very clear too when like Nick Cage is talking, he's just like, "Don't kill him, just scare him away."
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, and he tells him to use his other hand.
Yeah, he does.
Sorry, go ahead. There is humor in this movie. It's not like Sam Raimi level humor, but this movie does have a decent amount of chuckles.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I enjoyed the quips. So Kay is certainly not as strong as Felsen, but he is pretty nimble and relatively quick, and holds his own well enough in the fight that they actually do let him journey with him. So we got another guy on the journey. Pretty sure we have our full party now, but let's see how it goes. They stop to make camp for the night and set a fire, and Bayman brings the witch food and a blanket, and she confides to him that the priest accompanying them is the one that tortured her. She tells Bayman that she's seen these trials that witches are put to, and that the outcome is essentially usually death either way. She specifically uses an example where a woman was accused of being a witch, and so they filled her pockets with rocks and threw her in the lake. And if she drowned, that meant she was human, but she didn't. She kept swimming and refused to drown, and that proved that she was a witch, and so they killed her anyway. So kind of a catch-22 way of dispensing justice, and she's not wrong. So
well, yeah, weren't like the Salem witch trials, wasn't it? Like they would burn them at the stake and then say like, "Well, if you die, good news, you're human. If you don't, you're a witch, and we're gonna kill you anyway."
No, so actually, no witches were burned in Salem. They were all hanged.
And that one dude that got like crushed by a boulder.
Yeah, what he was pressed to death.
Pressed
where
to
they would
death,
put a board on top of you and keep putting stones on you, and it took him several days to die. And
yeah, that seems pretty awful.
When they asked him if he had any last words, because like supposedly from the descriptions, like his eyes are bugging out of his head, and like he's been there for days, like he's gonna die. Yeah. So like, do you have any last words? And he's like, more weight. Dude was a crazy badass.
Giles Corey, I think.
Giles Corey, name. Yep. Yeah. I mean, he was kind of a psycho. He seemed like a crazy, angry neighbor, but the guy went out like a badass. I'll give him that. But yeah, also, if you look further into the Salem witch trials, a lot of it, besides being essentially the Puritan predecessor to Satanic Panic, was also basically outright robbery. You know, poor people being tossed in a jail based on an accusation that they can't get out of, lands and properties seized by other people, divvied up, and so on and so forth. So it really degenerated into people accusing people so they could steal their shit. This is very generic. I know this because I went to Salem for a vacation. I got really interested in a lot of the history stuff, but I am by no means an expert. So I just do know that there was no burnings, only hangings. So when Bayman gets back to the fire, the priest seems overly curious as to what she said to him, and insists that they set up a watch schedule to ensure she's constantly observed. And Eckhart is on first witch watch. So it cuts almost immediately to the end of Eckhart's watch, and the priest comes to take over. Eckhart is having second thoughts about this whole thing and says he's going to go and tell the others. But the witch, yells like not to leave her alone with the priest because the priest tortured her, and he gets a little bit too close to the cage, and the witch grabs him and attacks him, like yanks him into the bars. The priest runs to assist him, and the witch snatches the crucifix off of his neck and jams it into his forearm, and then steals the keys to the cage and dips out of the caged carriage and takes off into the night. And so the boys have to go on a hunt to retrieve her. So far in this film, I was like, all right, this is relatively straightforward, and my expectation was that they were going to make it like, oh, okay, so Cage and Pearlman's character get disillusioned with the Crusades, and then they pick this up mainly because Bayman feels like he's going to try and stop this girl from dying, some innocent girl from dying. So I thought the whole thing was going to be, there's no witchery. This is just classic short brutish lives in the 1300s. But
And that the priest was probably the actual bad guy. Like, that's what I was thinking.
Yeah, it was relatively straightforward. But the next scene is where things take a turn, and there is apparently some weird shit happening. So they chase the woman into a sort of unfriendly seeming village. Like, people are just shutting their doors and windows, and they manage to corner the girl in the town square. But when they turn her around, it's a totally different girl, and she's got the plague. And so they take off to continue to chase the girl, try to find the right girl, and they chase her into like a mass grave of plague victims. I found this a little bit weird because it wasn't like they went down like a slope. It's just they found themselves between like walls of earth with like puddles filled with bodies in them.
Yeah, it sort of looked like a trench from like World War One is what I kind of immediately thought. Just to make this kind of visual for the listener on an audio medium.
That is exactly what it looked like. We get a cool plague dog in one of the scenes, like a real mangy looking mutt, like chomping at some dead plague body. I don't know if they used practical effects or it was CGI, but the dog looked cool and plaguey.
I'm pretty sure all of it is CG except for some of the practical effects on plague victims earlier in the movie. The studio that did all the CG was Tippett Studio, which was started by Phil Tippett, the guy that worked on a couple of Star Warses, the RoboCop, Starship Troopers, most recently Mad God. And I was actually surprised to hear that because usually the designs from that studio are a bit more interesting to me.
Maybe they brought the B team on this one because of the budget.
That's distinctly possible.
So at this point, we get our first sense of witchery being afoot. Eckhart, as he's running around, starts to hear his dead daughter calling out to him. Now, his daughter and his wife both died of the plague. He had another kid too. I'm not entirely sure. Because when he first meets Bayman and Felton, he describes how bad the plague is by saying, I've heard that, 3 out of 4 people are dying from the plague. And they're like, oh, that sucks. And he's like, yeah, my wife, my daughter, and my other kid all died of the plague. And I did not. So it was like the 3 out of 4 thing was coming from a very first person perspective there. So it seems like he's hallucinating. He's basically in his mind, he's chasing his daughter who passed away from the plague, rounds a corner and runs directly onto Kay's sword. Kay von Wallenbarth, by the way. I don't know why I included his full name here in my notes, but I did. So now you know it too. And Eckhart dies. Man ran chest first into a sword and did not live to tell the tale.
Yeah, that is a death sentence. I mean, it's the 1400s, and also they're in a fucking trench filled with the plague.
Filled with plague bodies.
The plague is everywhere, so
yeah. So nobody else in the crew, like, they start meeting up now after having been separated. Nobody seems overly put out by this involuntary manslaughter that's just occurred. The real witch shows up, the real alleged witch shows up and attacks Felson, but they restrain her. She cries. She immediately turns on the waterworks and blames running away on needing to get away from Mr. Abusive Priest. So they bury Eckhart under a tree, and it looked like a nice spot to get buried. Just my personal opinion. And the priest speaks to Bayman and tells him that the witch used her witchery to kill Eckhart after hearing about his daughter, and that's what she's trying to do. She's trying to use her witch powers on everybody and use anything that she can to mess them up and pick them off one by one. And when they turn to look at her, she sort of smirks at him from her cage. Like, is she a witch? Is she just a girl? The suspense is killing me at this point. But the witch goes right back to, trying to play off of Bayman's bleeding heart, while Kay is a bit upset about accidentally murdering, Eckhart. I don't blame the kid. Eckhart, like I said, ran full full speed into the tip of the sword. That's just, you got to watch where you're going, buddy.
I mean, yeah, that's gonna fuck you up, even if you do it by accident. Like, you just saw a man die to your sword.
Yeah, no, I get I get being upset by it. But this one I think was entirely out of his hands. It's like somebody diving in front of your vehicle. Yes, you're probably gonna need some therapy for it, but ultimately, I don't think it was your fault necessarily. So at this point, the troop comes to a real rickety ass rope and plank bridge spanning a relatively high gap.
Classic adventure movie move. You got to ramp that tension somehow.
Very classic, but also I thought this was relatively well done. So Hagamar gets a ration of shit for this, because he's like, what, they're like, why would you take us this way? This bridge does not seem safe at all. Now we're basically stuck. He's like, look, the last time I was this way was like 3 years ago. I didn't know the bridge was in this bad shape. What are you gonna do? This is the route, right? Well, everybody's yelling at each other. Bayman just starts walking his horse across this bridge, which is fucking insane. I appreciate his no nonsense attitude here, but I mean, you go directly across with a horse first. Horses, to my knowledge, are not very light in general. And if I was going to test a rickety ass bridge, I wouldn't do first pass with me and a gigantic animal. But then again, I never fought in the Crusades, so what do I know? Maybe I'm just being a baby about it.
I mean, you know how to wash your hands, which is something most of those dudes did not know.
This is very true. Didn't the guy who come up with that too, like
They
everybody
fucking slandered him for like a decade.
Yeah, didn't he like go crazy for about it too? And then like
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I was about to say, I would assume whoever came up with that, they were the rest of the world just calling him a nerd for like
Dude,
the
it
next
was
15
fucking
years.
doctors that were like slandering him for about a decade.
Oh my god! So I'll never forget this, because this was 2017. I was finishing up my bachelor's degree, and I had a science teacher who was like, she would rant about a climate change, about how it wasn't real. And I remember one time she ranted about washing your hands and about how you shouldn't do it because it will take away the natural bacteria off of your hands. That's like
that's
good
true
for you.
if you overwash your hands, if you have like the OCD problem where you're washing them raw, but that's not like
No. She said to never
taste.
wash your hands, and even worse than washing your hands is hand sanitizer.
Oh, I
use
bet
hand
her hand
sanitizer.
smelled like fucking Bart Simpson's hand in that one episode that the fucking babysitter spat in it.
That's insane to me. That's just like a skip away from the like you shouldn't get vaccinated because you're doing your own immune system a disservice, by not fighting off a disease yourself. And it's like,
listen,
well, then...
I've done my research. I've done my own research. Ivermectin is the way to go.
Now, the thing that annoys the piss out of me when it comes to those kind of conversations is like, all right, you go back to the Middle Ages, forget penicillin, forget Robitussin, forget any over-the-counter medication. Don't use any medicine if that's how you feel. If that's what you're basing it on, that's the logical foundation of your bit here. You shouldn't use medicine ever because you're just coddling your immune system. Where do you draw the line?
Yeah. Also, my favorite thing is just something fucking stupid. I was having an argument with somebody, and I was like, "Oh yeah, some of the world's best doctors are like from Cuba." I forget why we were talking about it. I think he was like talking shit. So I was like, "Yeah, when like there's a issue in the world, like Cuba normally sends the doctors like first, like if there's like a humanitarian effort in like Africa and shit." And he's like, "Oh, well, I don't believe that." And I'm like, "Okay, you can look it up." And he's like, "I'll do it when I get home." I'm like, "You have a computer in your pocket, look it up now." No, I'll do it when I get home. And I'm like, "You didn't do that, motherfucker." Same Same vibes. Same vibes.
So after Bayman gets across, he devises a plan. What they're gonna do is they're gonna bring the horses across separately, and then they're going to try and have get the wagon across. And so they set up to accomplish this plan. And I personally think stopping the episode here, where the plot is literally standing on the edge of a cliff, is exactly the appropriate kind of cliffhanger for an episode 1 to episode 2 transition. What do you guys think?
I'm down with that, but I do
Yeah.
want to do a little housekeeping addendum because I found a couple of interesting pieces.
Perfect.
Apparently, this had multiple reshoots by Brett Ratner, known sex pervert, and director of Rush Hour 1, 2, and at least one of the bad X-Men movies.
No,
and
listen,
also-
it was Brett Ratner's Rush Hour is what it was fucking called because he was jerking himself off so hard.
Right. And also the director of photography, the cinematographer for this, has 2 other Cage credits. He was the DOP on National Treasure Book of Secrets and Lord of War.
Huh.
That is kind of interesting.
Just thought that would a little necessary if you got a little Cage crossover.
We do love the Cage crossover.
Yes, we do. Also, apparently, Cage was interested in the project because he saw it as a tribute to the movies of Roger Corman from the 60s, which invariably starred the likes of Christopher Lee and Vincent Price. And so when he found out that Christopher Lee was actually in this movie too, he was like, hot damn.
Oh, that's great. I bet Cage is like a big fan of Witchfinder General and shit like that.
Also, this was all basically shot on location in Europe.
Yeah, Austria, Croatia, Hungary, I think, were the 3 countries that they shot in.
And Nick Cage learned how to ride a horse for this film.
That's surprising he didn't know how to ride a horse prior to this.
I'm a little shocked at 2011.
Yeah, that seems like a late in life skill acquisition for the
Yeah, but he's a car dude.
But I'm also trying to think. So like we haven't been going through his films in chronological order. Is he not on a horse in any other film prior to 2011?
Not that I can think of, but I'd have to do a once over on that filmography.
Huh. All right. So interesting questions for us to look into. And we will pick up with our intrepid band of Christians next time. In the meantime, you can find us on social media. We're on Twitter at cagefight_pod. Keep hearing something about a Patreon that we have, where the episodes are ad-free and we do extra stuff. Like very shortly, we're going to be watching The Wrestler. Everybody's really excited about that. So what's the Patreon again, Rich?
Patreon.com/NickCageFight. And yes, very shortly, asterisk, we will be watching The Wrestler.
Fantastic. I'm excited. Cannot wait. So join us next time for the thrilling conclusion of the Season of the Witch. And as always, listeners, we appreciate you.